Nah! The gavel fell with a hollow thud that echoed through the drafty pine walls of the Oakhaven parish. Jennifer Hayes stood alone in the center of the room, her wrists raw from the rough hemp rope binding them. Surrounding her were the faces of the people she had grown up with, faces now twisted by manufactured, self-righteous fury. It was October 14th, 1892, and the isolated timber town of Oakhaven had just pronounced its sentence. "The evidence is insurmountable," declared Mayor Thomas Blackwood, adjusting the lapels of his expensive wool coat purchased, Jennifer knew, with the very town funds she was currently accused of stealing. $4,000 from the Winter Relief Registry, gone, and the ledger found hidden beneath the floorboards of the Hayes homestead. Jennifer didn't flinch, though the betrayal burned her lungs like inhaling smoke. Beatrice Caldwell, the town's postmistress and Blackwood's most loyal sycophant, spat on the wooden floor near Jennifer's boots. "Thief, after we took you in when your father passed." Jennifer locked eyes with Blackwood. "You know exactly who altered that ledger, Thomas. You know why my father died in your mill, and you know why I was getting close to proving it." A murmur rippled through the pews, but Blackwood silenced it with another sharp crack of his gavel. "We are a merciful community," he announced, his voice oozing a practiced theatrical piety. "We will not hang you, Jennifer Hayes, but you are no longer of Oakhaven. You are hereby banished to the Black Ridge. You will not return on pain of death." A collective gasp swept the room. Banishment to the Black Ridge in mid-October wasn't mercy. It was a prolonged, agonizing execution. The ridge was a jagged spine of granite and unforgiving pines, battered by blizzards that buried the landscape in 6 feet of snow. The only shelter was the Devil's Maw massive, damp limestone cave, notorious for its freezing drafts and treacherous drops. Without another word, the town sheriff, a burly man named Arthur Pendleton, shoved Jennifer toward the heavy oak doors. They marched her 3 miles up the muddy logging trail, leaving her at the edge of the timberline with nothing but the clothes on her back, a rusted hatchet, a single wool blanket, and a tin of matches. "May God have mercy on you, Jennifer," Arthur muttered, looking anywhere but her eyes before turning his horse back toward the valley. Jennifer watched him go. The biting wind of the incoming winter whipped her dark hair across her face. She didn't cry. Crying froze your eyelashes and stole your energy. She turned and began the steep, agonizing climb toward the Devil's Maw. The cave was worse than the rumors. The Devil's Maw was a gaping, jagged wound in the side of the mountain, smelling of damp earth, bat guano, and centuries of undisturbed dust. As the first heavy flakes of winter snow began to fall, Jennifer knew that simply sitting inside the cavern would mean freezing to death within a week. The wind funneled into the mouth of the cave, turning it into an icebox. But Jennifer was the daughter of a master carpenter and logger. She knew how to work with the earth. For the first 4 days, fueled by pine nut tea, melted snow, and an absolute burning refusal to let Thomas Blackwood win, Jennifer worked until her hands bled. She chopped down young lodgepole pines, using her rusted hatchet, dragging the logs to the mouth of the cave. She couldn't build a freestanding cabin. She lacked the tools, the time, and the materials. Instead, she built a cabin into the cave. She used the natural limestone walls as the back and sides of her shelter. She stacked the pine logs across the front, creating a sturdy barricade against the wind. She packed the gaps with a thick mortar of cave mud, dry pine needles, and crushed limestone. For a roof, she wove a tight lattice of spruce boughs, sealing it with a layer of hardened clay she found near an underground spring deep within the cavern's recesses. By the time the first major blizzard hit in November, Jennifer was sealed inside. She had fashioned a crude hearth and chimney that vented smoke out of a natural fissure in the cave ceiling. It was dark, it was cramped, and it was deeply lonely, but it was warm. To survive the winter, she trapped snowshoe hares with snares made from threads of her own blanket and foraged for dormant roots. But the real challenge was the isolation. To keep her mind from fracturing in the deafening silence of the mountain, Jennifer began to expand her living space, chipping away at the loose rock at the back of her shelter to create a cellar for storing her dried meat. It was during one of these frantic, mind-numbing digging sessions in late January that the first twist of fate occurred. Jennifer was using a heavy, sharpened wedge of granite to break through a wall of brittle shale at the rear of her cabin. The cave floor here was uneven, and she wanted a flat surface to store her meager firewood. She swung the rock, expecting the familiar dull crunch of shale. Instead, there was a sharp clink. The impact sent a painful vibration up her arm, nearly forcing her to drop the makeshift tool. Frowning, Jennifer brought her lone tallow candle closer to the wall. The rock here was different. It wasn't limestone or shale. It was white, milky quartz, jutting out like a broken rib from the cave wall, and embedded within the quartz, gleaming warmly in the flickering candlelight, were thick, jagged wires of dull yellow. Jennifer froze. Her breath hitched in her throat. She rubbed the dirt away with her thumb. The yellow substance didn't flake off. It was soft, malleable, and heavy. Gold, she whispered to the empty cavern. It wasn't just a stray nugget left by a prehistoric river. It was a lode, a massive virgin vein of gold embedded in a quartz intrusion that had been hidden by a thin layer of shale for millennia. The town of Oakhaven sat at the bottom of the valley, scraping a living from timber, completely oblivious to the fact that the mountain looming over them held the king's ransom. Jennifer didn't sleep that night, or the next. Using her hatchet and sharpened rocks, she began to mine. She chipped away the quartz carefully, extracting chunks of gold that ranged from the size of peas to the size of her fist. She hid the gold beneath the dirt floor of her cabin, terrified that Arthur Pendleton or some wandering hunter might brave the ridge and find her. By the time the spring thaw arrived in April, Jennifer Hayes was technically the wealthiest woman in the state. But wealth in a cave meant nothing. She needed a plan, and she needed an identity. Leaving Oakhaven was impossible. They would arrest her on sight. Instead, Jennifer packed a heavy leather satchel with nearly 40 pounds of raw gold, a fraction of what she had mined, and hiked in the opposite direction, navigating the treacherous mountain passes for 5 days until she reached the bustling railroad city of Helena. She walked into the city looking like a wild woman, covered in dirt and dressed in rags. She slipped into the back door of a quiet, reputable assayer's office, run by a German immigrant named Elias Van Snow. Let's call him Elias Richter. Richter took one look at her and reached for the broom to chase her out until Jennifer dumped a handful of raw, high-carat gold onto his velvet counter. "I need cash, I need a bath, and I need a lawyer," Jennifer said, her voice raspy from months of underuse. In that order, Richter, recognizing the purity of the strike, became her most trusted ally. Over the next 3 years, Jennifer lived a dangerous double life. During the harsh winters, she was a ghost living in her cave cabin, secretly expanding the mine, extracting hundreds of pounds of gold. During the summers, she was Jennifer Sterling, a mysterious, wealthy widow operating out of Helena. She hired lawyers. She created a holding company named Ridge and Valley Resources. She legally purchased the deed to the Black Ridge, which Mayor Blackwood happily sold for a pittance to an anonymous buyer, thinking the land was utterly worthless. Once she owned the land, she brought in professional, discreet crews from out of state to modernize the mine. By 898, 6 years after her banishment, the Devil's Maw was producing thousands of ounces of gold a month. Jennifer Sterling was a millionaire many times over. She wore tailored silk dresses imported from Paris, stayed in luxury suites, and dined with governors. But she never forgot the drafty pine walls of the Oakhaven parish. While Jennifer's star rose, Oakhaven fell into ruin. Thomas Blackwood's corruption had rotted the town from the inside out. He had mismanaged the timber mill, embezzled the remaining town funds, and borrowed heavily to maintain his lavish lifestyle. By the winter of 1899, the town was on the verge of total collapse. The bank in Helena owned the mortgage to almost every home, farm, and business in Oakhaven. On a frigid morning in December, exactly 7 years after her banishment, a sleek, black enclosed carriage pulled by 4 magnificent draft horses rolled into Oakhaven. The townspeople, bundled in threadbare coats, stepped out of their dilapidated homes to stare. The carriage stopped directly in front of the town hall. The door opened, and an impeccably dressed woman stepped out. She wore a heavy coat of dark velvet lined with mink, and a wide-brimmed hat that partially obscured her face. She walked into the town hall, followed by 2 stern-looking men in gray suits. Mayor Blackwood, looking older, grayer, and noticeably panicked by the sudden arrival of wealthy strangers, rushed forward. "Welcome, welcome to what do we owe the honor of this visit." The woman removed her hat. The silence that hit the room was absolute. Beatrice Caldwell dropped a stack of letters. Sheriff Arthur Pendleton, standing by the stove, went as white as a sheet. "Hello, Thomas," Jennifer said. Her voice was no longer the desperate plea of a framed girl. It was the polished, commanding tone of a woman who owned mountains. Blackwood staggered back, his jaw working, but producing no sound. "Jennifer, you dead. You died on the ridge." "I found the ridge quite accommodating, actually." Jennifer smiled, a sharp, cold expression. She signaled to one of the men behind her, her head lawyer, Mr. Harrison. Harrison opened a leather briefcase and pulled out a thick stack of documents. "Mr. Blackwood," Harrison began, his voice echoing in the silent hall, "I represent Ridge and Valley Resources. Over the past 6 months, my client has purchased the debt of the Oakhaven Timber Mill, the municipal bonds of this township, and the private mortgages of 27 properties, including your own." Blackwood looked like he was going to faint. "Purchased from the bank? Who is your client?" Jennifer stepped forward, her expensive boots clicking sharply on the same wooden floor where she had once been sentenced. She tossed a small, heavy leather pouch onto Blackwood's desk. It opened, spilling several large raw gold nuggets across the polished wood. "I am Thomas," Jennifer said. "I own the mill. I own the banknotes. I own the land you're standing on. Ads and attention-grabbing content. Ads annoy your debts." Beatrice Caldwell let out a whimpering sob. The townspeople were paralyzed by a mixture of terror and awe. "You can't do this," Blackwood gasped, sweat beading on his forehead despite the freezing room. "You have no right." "I have every right," Jennifer said, leaning in close. "You banished me to die, Thomas, but the mountain didn't kill me. It made me, and now I am going to do to you what you did to me. You have exactly 1 hour to pack your things and leave my town." "Leave? Where will I go?" Blackwood pleaded, his arrogance entirely shattered. Jennifer looked him up and down, feeling the heavy, satisfying weight of closure settling into her chest. She glanced out the window, toward the jagged, snow-covered peaks looming over the valley. "I hear the Black Ridge is lovely this time of year," Jennifer said. She turned and walked out of the hall, leaving the doors wide open behind her. The cold winter wind blew into the room, but for the first time in 7 years, Jennifer Hayes didn't feel the chill at all.